Hi, I'm Randy Patterson, and this is Psychology Salon, a channel looking at various issues from a psychological perspective. Consider clicking the subscribe button below. In the past couple of decades, mass murder has become virtually a daily occurrence in the United States of America. This has led to calls from some quarters for some kind of blanket mental health screening, particularly of youth, to attempt to identify those who are at risk of committing these crimes. When people object to the invasion of privacy that this would involve, they're just dismissed. Surely the prevention of these terrible tragedies would justify a minor intrusion in the form of a screening tool. Well, the focus on privacy and rights issues is reasonable, but it ignores a more difficult statistical issue that will almost certainly doom to failure any form of mental health screening. Let's see why. Imagine that the number of people who will commit mass murder is 0.1% of the population, meaning that 1 in 1,000 will someday take out their guns and start shooting. In fact, the number is much, much smaller than this. If there were so many perpetrators, the murder rate would be enormously higher than it is. But having an inflated figure like this minimizes rather than exaggerates the problem that we're going to focus on, however, so it's a good working estimate. Next. Imagine that psychologists like me have developed a screening tool that is 90% accurate at identifying people who will become mass murderers. In fact, this is hugely optimistic. Very few psychological tests have anything like this level of accuracy, and it is virtually inconceivable that we will ever have one so good at identifying the propensity to mass violence. But whatever. Let's imagine a 90% accurate test. What's the error rate? If you said 10%, you're wrong. The correct answer is, it depends. Depends on what? Depends on the proportions of targets, truly dangerous people, and misses, people who will never do this in the population. In this example, the error rate is about 99.9%. You might think, but it can't be. Test is 90% accurate. It is. Let me show you how this comes about. Imagine a town of 10,000 people, or a school district with 10,000 students, if all we care about is school shootings. We're going to test everybody. Now, we know that 0.1% are going to go on to commit mass murder if we don't intervene. That's 10 people in this little town. The test is 90% accurate, so it correctly identifies 9 of them as being at risk. We miss 1 of them. Now we know that 100% minus 0.1% equals 99.9% of people in this town are never going to commit this kind of crime. In a town of 10,000, that's 9,990 people. Our test has a 10% error rate, so it misidentifies 999 people as being at risk. Okay, how many people does the test say are at risk overall? Well, 999, those are our false positives, plus 9, those are our real targets, equals 1,008. Of this 1,008, what proportion are really the people we want? Well, it's 9 people out of 1,008, equals 0.0089, which is 0.89%. How many of these are errors? Well, 100% minus 0.89% is 99.91%. We're going to intervene with over 1,000 people in this town, even though we know that 99.9% of them are misidentified. Well, there's your rights issue. The total error rate is slightly higher because we also missed one of the 10 who's at risk. This is a false negative. The test declared them safe, even though they weren't. Well, okay, but this is an artificial example. What if we plug in figures that are closer to the real world? Well, the proportion of errors increases the rarer the targets are in the tested population. So if mass murder is only committed by 1 in 10,000 people, or slightly more likely 1 in 100,000, the error rate rises enormously. The errors are also higher if the test is less accurate, which, as I've said, is likely. It's vanishingly unlikely that we will ever have a test for this kind of thing as accurate as 90%. As the accuracy declines, the error rate also rises. Now, some people will point out that there are two types of errors here. False positives, these are the 999 citizens that are said to be at risk but who aren't, and false negatives, the 1 in 10 future shooters who we miss. Now, I've assumed that these two error rates are the same, 10% in both cases. Can we really assume that? Well, actually, no. But if you increase the sensitivity of the test to ensure that everyone at risk is identified, you also increase the number of false positives. So that 99.91% error rate is going to be even higher. And if you decrease the sensitivity of the test so that fewer people are mistakenly identified as being at risk, you also start missing the real targets. So the whole point of the screening is very quickly lost. The result is that mass screening of a population to identify relatively low frequency targets simply does not work well unless you have a test that's nearly flawless. And usually you don't. Does this apply elsewhere? Yeah. I've used mass murder for the example, but the same principle operates in all forms of testing for low-frequency characteristics in a population. Suicide, psychosis, other forms of mental illness, and many types of physical health screening as well. This is why we keep hearing that many of the screening tools used in physical medicine are problematic. Even if the tests are reasonably good, they often produce high numbers of false positives among the healthy population. It may still be useful to use many of them, but you have to keep in mind the true error rate. We cannot assume that if a test is 90% accurate, that this means it will have only 10% errors. In most cases, the error rate is going to be much, much higher than that. What does this say about psychology's ability to prevent mass murder? The prevention of these crimes is an extremely difficult task. As I've said elsewhere, the idea that mental health services properly enhanced will reduce the rate of mass murder is simply mistaken. It won't. Distress, depression, bullying, mental illness are common aspects of the human condition. For the most part, they do not result in mass casualty events. If we want to take mass murder seriously, we need to stop pointing to the mental health professions as the potential saviors. We are not. And in my view, we never will be. But what else can we do? Well, about those guns. Now, why are you on about this? Every time there's a mass murder in the United States, people point to the problems associated with the gun culture. They argue that putting some sensible restrictions on gun availability, registration, and ownership is the only reasonable step. Then the National Rifle Association winks, Yoda-like, and says, "No, there is another." And they look sidelong at the mental health professionals over in the corner. Well, you can stop winking, Yoda. We are not your solution, and we never will be. Thanks for watching. My books, including the Assertiveness Workbook, are available from all major booksellers, and my online courses can be found at psychologysalon.teachable.com. See you again.